Before we jump into today's show, I've got a really exciting announcement to make. The autumn cohorts for Start Your Podcast group program are now open. There are 5 dates between September and October, and it's a 6-week program that will get you launched before Christmas. So if podcasting was on your to-do list this year, if you really want to get your podcast up and done by the end of 2023, then come and join me for one of those cohorts and let's make it happen. I have a free masterclass available for you called Understanding the Power of Podcasting. You can go over to donnaeade.com/masterclass, watch the masterclass and get access to that enrollment. I hope to see you in one of the autumn cohorts very soon. That's donnaeade.com/masterclass. Let's get back to the show. You're listening to the Wedding Procast UK, the place to be if you are a UK wedding professional looking to grow and streamline your business. I'm your host, Donna Eade, 10-year wedding photography veteran and CEO at the Society of Professional Wedding Vendors. If you want to grow and streamline your business, this is the podcast for you. Make sure you hit subscribe where you listen or join our email list at www.spwv.co.uk. You'll find the sign up form at the bottom of every episode, and by doing so, you won't miss a thing. So let's jump into today's show. Podcast, everybody. This week I am absolutely delighted to bring you a fantastic guest. Her name is Sas Huntwood, and she passionately believes in people capturing and sharing their stories. You are unique, so is your story, and the world deserves to hear it. This is a fantastic episode, so much great content and some great stories, so I hope you will join us. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast where you listen. If it is on the website, then head to the bottom of the page or just under where the podcast player is, and you can enter your details so that you get notified every time a new episode drops. Welcome to the podcast, Sas. I'm so excited to have you here to talk about your business, The Storytellers. So why don't you start with telling us a little bit about your background, where you're from, what you do, and how you ended up where you are with this business.
Fantastic. Thanks for inviting me today, Donna. Yes, it's quite a long journey. I'll shorten it, don't worry. So we set up the Storytellers International last year. So during a global pandemic, it seemed a really good idea to set up a new company. I think half people thought we were crazy. Half the people thought we were probably very brave. Either or, probably both. And before that, we'd moved down to Devon from Berkshire in January 2020, just before the first lockdown. For the last 8 years, I've been running a sales and leadership training company. So working with companies and helping, training them in sales and leadership. But I'd had the idea for Storytellers for a couple of years and never seen the right time to launch it. And with the other company going online and kind of being managed, I said, this is a great time to do it because people we're reminiscing a lot. We're talking about stories. And it seemed an ideal time. So we launched that last year. I'm married. I have a 10-year-old daughter who's 10 going on 20. And so that's and I love stories. So that's kind of really my passion, storytelling and hearing people's stories.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I love the lifestyle you're creating for yourself and your 10-year-old, because I have a cousin who lives in Cornwall, and I just think she had such an idyllic upbringing, and she is one of the most pleasant human beings. Like, she's just so kind and so soft-hearted, and obviously my auntie and uncle are part of creating that, but she just grew up in this environment where it was just such a lovely place. And I know every place has its pockets of issues, but Devon and Cornwall, you can't get more idyllic, I don't think, in the UK. So great choice, and and I'm sure she will benefit greatly from being down there. Storytellers, I fell in love with the idea when you explained it to me. So for those of you that are listening, when I first heard about Sas's company, I was just like, oh, she does photo books. That's what I thought it was, because I always think of I don't even know why I thought of it, to be honest with you, but I just thought, oh, because I think I saw a picture and there was photos in it, and it was a hardback book, and I thought, oh, it's a photo book, you know, maybe from baby to your wedding day or whatever, and that's what I thought it was. But it is so much more than that. So why don't you tell us, what is a storybook? What would you put in it? How did it come about?
It's a great question, Donna, and it's almost like, remember Michael Aspel and This Is Your Life and his big red book. If you ever remember that TV brand, it's that, like that, but on steroids. And it's the stories and memories that sit behind the photos. Because how often do we have photos now, unfortunately, uploaded onto the cloud? We very rarely print them off. Some people might do and put them on a canvas or a photo, but then we don't. What does it elicit? It elicits a memory or story. So that holiday you went when we were allowed to go abroad, or that family dinner, or that Christmas, and it's a memory and story that sits behind it. And that's what a storybook does. It takes all the memories and stories that sit behind the photos. We capture them for now. We capture them now, so they're recorded for future generations. The idea came about because my great gran was an amazing storyteller. She died when I was in my teens. She was 99. And I just remember as a young child sitting at the foot of her kind of big armchair, and she with this big bay window, and she'd make up stories about people walking by into space with kind of real stories of growing up in the 1900s, 1910s, 20s as a young child in London, and how she met my great grandfather, Ted, who was a Coldstream Guard. And she told me about this amazing story about her. She was a maid, she was in service, and she had the day off, her one day off a week, with her best friend, and they were in Windsor and Eton kind of area, standing one side of the Thames on the bridge. She said to her friend, the next soldier who crosses the bridge, I'm going to marry. And it was Ted Hunt, because the Coldstream Guards were based then in Windsor. And she married him, and they went on and had 2 sons. He fought in both World Wars, and ended up with PTSD. Now we know it's PTSD, shell shock then. So much so, he couldn't actually speak at his wedding. He couldn't say his vows. He just nodded. So he pretty much agreed to anything on his wedding day. But an amazing man. And those are the stories that I remember and I've passed on to my daughter. But there's so many I've forgotten, because I was a teenager. And as a teenager, quite frankly, you know, half the time you weren't really paying attention to your grandparents or your parents. And I didn't write them down. I wish I had. And that's kind of where the idea came from.
Yeah. And I think that's so beautiful that you remember that story. Like my nan died when I was 16. She was 76. She had a blood clot, and it was unexpected. But I always thought she was really old. Like, I didn't really know how old she was growing up, and I just always thought she was really old. And 76 isn't that old. It's come in today's standards. So yeah, and I didn't ask her anything, and she wasn't a storyteller. She was a quiet woman, you know. She watched her TV, and you know, we had Sunday dinner together. But she wasn't really that kind of. She taught me to knit. She liked knitting, so you know, she taught me the needlecraft stuff, but she never sort of sat and told stories of the old days, and I never asked. And it's weird, because I did history as my degree. I absolutely love history, and I love knowing about the past, so it surprises me that I never did. But yeah, at that age I didn't, and so I have no idea where she came from, how she met my granddad. Oh, I do know how she met my granddad, actually, because my dad told me. But you know, that it never came from her. And being able to sort of savor those stories before it's too late, you know, I love to know where I came from. I love to know the backstory of my family. So being able to sort of capture that in a book that can be passed on, because this is the thing, just what you said, when you're a teenager, you don't value it. It's just like, oh, Nan's going on again.
Yeah.
You don't
it's that
really
story
focus.
I've heard 10 times before, and it's just been passed, and you're going, oh, here it goes. It goes through, if you ever watch Only Fools and Horses and Uncle Albert and his war stories, it's like, oh, during the war becomes a good story again. And you switch off until they get new audience. And you're right, it's those stories. And I think during the last year, I'm ever optimistic and hopeful that we've really nurtured and understood the importance of those memories and sharing stories, because we haven't been able to physically see people. And thank goodness for technology such as this, because to be able to have that connection with people to share stories. Because of course, if you were anything like us, we were having like weekly family dinners or something, and over Zoom, and you were talking about what's your week been like, any stories? Not much, really. We've been baking, gardening, doing our daily walk. But then what we did, we slipped into reminiscing, and we slipped into, remember that time we went on that holiday? Or do you remember when Uncle Albert did this? And recording those stories is really important.
Yeah. And I think we do our own sort of version of it. I know that, in the first lockdown, my sister started with my niece a COVID photo album. And, they took photos of what they were doing in the first lockdown. Excellent. And, stuck it in a book. Now, they haven't written the stories behind the images, as it were. But so we want to keep memories alive. That's why we take photos, is to capture that moment in time. But sometimes there can be so much more detail around it, or not even necessarily around that photo, but that photo sparks a story. Like if you see a soldier in a photograph, the stories that could come out of that, because if you showed that to the person it is, they could go, oh, I could tell you some stories. And it might not be necessarily completely relevant to that image, but it's to do with that time period, and being able to write those down and keep them, and if I'd have done that with my nan, and I could have shown my granddaughter, haven't got one yet, guys, honestly, but my future, if I could show her, this is what your great grandma was like, and this is the life that she led, I would like to think, if I had that of my great grandma, I have no idea on my dad's side at all who my great grandmother was. It's all blank. From if I didn't know them, if I didn't physically know them in person, I don't know anything about my family, and that's sad.
Yeah, it is sad, because for me it's social history. It's history is written by scholars, and it's and this last year particularly, and it's great that your sister's done that for her daughter, is capturing. This last year will be studied, and it will be studied, PhDs and masters, and lots of books and everything written about it. But actually, what about us, the people went through it, the social history behind it? So our generation passes on, and we've got, as you say, children, grandchildren, great grandchildren. They can look back at this kind of year and go, wow, this is written by my great grandma. This is what it was like to live through coronavirus. So that's just an example of a big life event, but it could be any life event. What was it like just living generally in the 1960s in London or Liverpool? Kind of understanding the scene then, and written by ordinary people like you and I, and capturing that social history is so important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So you do this for people, a grandmother could come to you and say, I want to write down my stories for my grandchildren and great grandchildren, and she could come to you and do that. But today I wanted to talk about a rather special type of story that you write, because of course I do run the Society of Professional Wedding Vendors, so I am always interested in connecting with people that are involved in the wedding industry, and that's how we got connected. So tell us a little bit about your wedding stories.
Well, as you say, weddings are, if you think about your life events, a wedding, civil partnership is like the event, isn't it? So I remember planning for our civil partnership. And then we got upgraded, as they say, to marriage status a few years ago. But we did the whole big thing though for the civil partnership. It was a whole weekend of celebrations, the planning behind this and everything. And who should you invite? Who shouldn't you invite? All those big decisions, and what you're going to do. And it's a huge, huge event in your life. And you spend a lot of money on your photographer. You should do anyway. That's always, should always spend a lot of money on your photographer, because
completely agree.
those photos are with you for the rest of your life. So you get a great photographer and you capture these wonderful pictures, and you may get some funny photos from your guests as well, of some behind the scenes of things that you missed, because you always do as the couple. But then you look through that wonderful, you might even get like some guest interviews. You know, sometimes you get the videographer like we did for guest interviews, but you miss a lot of the stories that go on about the day, but also about your life. So what we do, our wedding story bit's a celebration of love. It's the love story. So what we tend to do is work with the couple and talk to them before the wedding. You know, talk about the proposal, how they met, what they love about each other. Talk to them after the wedding. So the idea is we capture, was the wedding like, what was it, you know, and we tend to interview them separately. So we get the unique perspective of what it was like for each of them on the day, the nerves and what they thought. Capture the honeymoon if they've gone on one. But we also, more importantly, talk to their wedding party and capture their messages. I've tried to do this, I've been ushered a wedding where you've been given the guest book, that dreaded guest book, which is a fantastic, wonderful idea. And as a couple, you really treasure that guest book. But then someone's given the task of going to capture people's messages. The problem with that is often it's late into the evening and people have had far too much to drink, or they start replicating and copying everybody else's messages. Or you just get, so you kind of you lose, and or you're trying to find Aunt Mary, who's now passed out over there, and we need Aunt Mary's message. So the idea behind this is we capture the guest messages. We ask them to send in the messages to us. So we include those in your wedding storybook. So we've got the lovely, wonderful photos, the official and unofficial, you know, the story, your love story, but also those messages of goodwill from your loved ones that we can include in there.
So I'm assuming that you can go, you say you start the story from when the couple meets, so they would be able to give you photographs from, you know, their first date or whatever, and little points throughout their relationship that, you know, they might talk about in their story that they've got a photo of, and it's just that whole involvement. And I think it's just a beautiful way to capture it, because I know that a lot of weddings that I've seen, the couple will often have like a table or a wall or, you know, something that has pictures of them from when they were a baby up until when they sort of got together and things like that. And this is just like you said, this on steroids. It's like it's taking all of those things and putting it into one place that you get to keep forever, rather than having, you know, oh, that's great that wall was there, because somebody might come up to you and go, oh my gosh, what were you doing in that photo? And you tell them the little story of how that photo came to be. But that story is then out and gone and forgotten about. And having it in your book means that you're going to let them be able to pass that on to your children, and they're going to be able to see how that love story came to be. And I don't like to harp on the negative, because I'm a big believer in love, and I'm a big believer in marriage, and I always want it to work out and be the happy thing. And I'm very sort of, I don't know, in some ways I'm always trying to put people off getting married, because I only want the people that really should be getting married to get married. So I'm like, if you've got any doubt, it really frustrates it, especially when you can see it. You know, sometimes you can see it. Like, I actually was engaged to my daughter's dad, and I broke it off with him 7 months before the wedding. So we already had deposits down on things. Because I knew that I couldn't say until death do us part, and I just wasn't going to say those vows unless I meant them. And so and I mean, it was brave, and I know that some people just don't have the strength to do it, and it breaks my heart that they don't have the strength to do that. I had a family member who knew that it wasn't really right, who we'd had conversations about whether she should or she shouldn't, and she did, and it was 18 months, and then it was divorce. And you just think you could have saved yourself so much money and heartache if you just, you know, took that step. But I think people tend to get into that roller coaster of, you know, oh, we're together and we've been together a few years now, so the next logical step is to get engaged, and they just follow it, which is kind of hard. But there are other relationships where it's just, you know, it is all good, and then you get married, and then whatever, something happens that it then falls apart, and that's sad. But I think if you have children especially, you know, they always want to know that mum and dad loved each other. And it is so hard when people have broken up and they can't be civil to each other, or it just doesn't work. For a child, being able to have that storybook and just know that actually they were born out of love, and it was, you know, this beautiful romantic thing, because you always forget, it isn't easy how in an instant, you know, all of your love for somebody is just like, I hate him, and it's like all of that stuff, when you look back at a story like that and you're like, oh, the time that we went to the cinema and I spilled popcorn everywhere and we laughed, you know, and then, you know, at this point it would be if they took their kid to the cinema and they dropped popcorn, they'd be like, oh, you're useless. You know, it's just the difference.
It's two sides of the same coin, love and hate, they say. And absolutely, you're right. To have that memories that they can look back and go, actually, you know, out of any relationship, there was a reason why you got together. There's a reason why you fell in love. There's a reason why you decided to get married, whatever their reasons were. And, you know, particularly when there's children involved, you know, and I don't know what the stats are now in divorce rates, but I know, I'm mid-40s now, and, you know, several of our friends, unfortunately, I've got children, have got divorced in the last few years. And it's awful. It is awful. And it's something, you know, we made the decision to get married. So we've been married, I've got to remember this, get this right, otherwise I'm in trouble.
Yeah, you will be.
12 years. And nearly 13 this year. And it was a decision. It took us a while to decide that we wanted to get married, but we did it. We felt for the right reasons. We loved each other, but we also, again, could say that vow till death do us part. And I think particularly, you know, marriage, we know, takes a lot of work. Any relationship takes a lot of work. So my former tennis partner is in her mid-80s, and she'd been with her partner for many decades. They'd never got married. It was their second kind of relationship in marriage for whatever reason. And they got married about 2 years ago. And it was lovely. So I know, it's wonderful. It is lovely. But you know, she's in her 80s. Amazing woman, highly independent. And John, now her husband, they're very much in love. But it wasn't a natural knowledge that they felt the need to get married early on in the relationship. They waited till later. But I think you're right. Be able to catch those memories and stories to share with your children and for yourself as well. I think, you know, to look back at some point and go, actually, I was happy at a time.
Yeah. And they say that, don't they? Write a letter to yourselves and put it in a box with a bottle of wine, and that you either open on your first anniversary or open after the first argument or something like that, to remind yourselves. And I think a lot of the time we forget, and it can be really sad for the children if the parents do end up divorced, that they're only hearing the negatives about and as much as people try, and I'm sure they try their best not to let the children kind of hear that, it happened for me.
So children are
very intuitive, and
they know exactly what's going on.
Exactly.
So I was having a bit of a low day yesterday, and as we all do, I was having a bit of a low day, which is quite unusual for me, but I was having a bit of a tough day. So I went to bed, and on my pillow was a little note from my daughter saying, "Mama, you rock."
Oh, bless her.
I was like, she knew. I didn't have to tell her. She just sensed from me that I was not my usual self. So kids pick up on these things all the time. And actually, recently we've been doing a couple of books for children for the child who are part of divorced parents. So with one parent has asked us to do a book between the relationships, capture relationship with them and their daughter, for example. So when they're older, she will understand more about the relationship, and particularly during the last year of not being able to see them as much. So absolutely. And I think it's about capturing that and revisiting that love.
And of course, we hope that all the weddings end up in absolute total wedded bliss, and it still works. That, you know, things that
can you
forget.
imagine looking at it when 25, you've been married for 25 years, and you imagine looking back at opening back up that storybook.
Yeah.
And going, goodness, was my hair really like that? I do that now. I look back and go, did I really have my hair like that for our wedding day? My God, what was I thinking?
Yeah. Why didn't you tell me? True. And all of those kind of things, you then, it sparks memories. Reading stories sparks memories. So being able to look back at that on your 25th wedding anniversary, you'll see stories that you will have forgotten about. And you, especially because you guys interview the wedding party as well, there are going to be, you know, you have more affinity with your own memories it's easier to trigger them. You tell the stories, and you know, I always say that I've got a memory of an elephant. I have stories from when I was 2 years old. Now,
wow, that's very impressive.
And it's not because obviously it's not a memory. It's ingrained because I've told the story so many times.
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember when I was around 2 years old, and I know it was around 2 or 3, because we moved up here when I was 4, so we live in Northamptonshire, but I was born in Hounslow. So we moved up here when I was 4, so I know it was before then, and I was about 3 years old, 2-3 years old, and we had one of those kettles that sat on the hob with the whistle.
Yes.
Yeah, and I had taken that whistle and dropped it over the balcony of our flat. I remember my mum telling me, "You best go down there and find it, young lady," and me toddling off on my own in Hounslow. Like, would you ever do that these days? Toddling off down these stone stairs to try and find, and I couldn't find the whistle. I was in so much trouble. But you know, I remember that. Well, I don't remember it happening. I did it. I kept telling the story, and then I have an ingrained image of it because I've got photos of me at that time. I know what I look like. I remember the layout of the flat that we lived in, so I can picture it happening, and it's ingrained because I've told it. And so you have your stories, but other people's stories, they tend to go in one ear and out the other. We've only got so much mental capacity.
Absolutely. And I think during your wedding day as well, the top tip I was given, but we were given before, was grab each other at some point during the day and just take yourself off and just look around you, because all your loved ones, the ones that love you, you know, close in this world, will be there celebrating. They're there because of you, but because you don't see each other, it's amazing. As a couple, you get to the end of the day, you're like exhaustion, but you actually can't
are we married now?
Yeah. Oh, that was very quick. Went very quickly. And you don't remember most of the day, and you don't see all the other stuff that goes on because you're taken off to do photographs as well. So you miss some of the fun and games that goes on, and the stories when Aunt Mabel does this, or did you not see Aunt Mabel get up and dance? No, I didn't. Where was I? So those stories that your wedding party and your wedding guests can tell you are unique, and as you rightly say, they're their memories and stories that you often miss because it's your wedding.
Yeah. And it's a very good point. I used to say that to all of my couples, and when I was photographing them, is, you know, take a moment. I always used to take them away for their portraits, and I'd like, this is the moment, like, go off down there, I'll take some like long shots and stuff, just have 5 minutes, your husband and wife now. And I leave them with that and let them walk off, and it's just like their first time where they're on their own as husband and wife, and I give them that 5 minutes. And then when we're sort of, and I always say, you know, when everybody sat down for dinner, just stop, the pair of you, just stop and look around, because it goes so fast and you miss so much. And so I love that you were told that as well, because, you know, it's something that I always tell my couples, but you don't know that everybody is told that. And it's the one thing that you're guaranteed to hear from a couple at the end of their wedding day, or, you know, if you ask them about it, it went by so fast.
It does, because it takes months of planning. I think that's the thing, it's preparation for this big life event. And I find when we're interviewing couples before the wedding, it's almost for them, it's a release valve to talk to us, because we're someone objective and not emotionally involved in the wedding plans. But also it's an opportunity for them to revisit when they're caught up between what flowers to choose, or, you know, now we're confused on which transport to use, all those other, and place settings and all the other ridiculous things you have to plan, to actually revisit the reasons why you're doing this. What was the reason why you decided to say yes? And for me, that's really important to revisit that before you get married, so you don't get caught up, as you said earlier, between the whole thing and then suddenly you're there on the wedding day. So it's a release valve as well.
I love what you said, that you interview them separately as well, so there's kind of none of that like nervousness or that checking, or am I remembering that right? It really is that person's perspective of how it happened, and just being able to sort of, obviously they don't see it until it's completed, so they don't see each other's side until they're sitting there, and I can just imagine the times where it's like, really, you thought that? No, that's not what happened.
Absolutely, because we remember things differently. So my wife has a memory like yourself, so she will remember our first date, what I wore, what she wore, where we went, everything. I don't have that level of memory, but she will remember something down to the minute detail, but from a very different angle than I will. And we remember differently, particularly I'd say male and females remember things. Male, very factual, data, chronological, did this, and this. Whereas women are much more, we'll talk about the feelings, emotions behind it. So with men, when we're interviewing men, I find I've got to delve deeper.
You've got to pull a little bit more.
You've got to pull a little bit more to get how they were actually feeling on the morning of the wedding, for example. So you know,
how did the morning of the wedding go? Yeah, I got up at 9:45, had my breakfast, got in my suit.
Yeah, pretty much. I get that. So any thoughts as you woke up, the first thing you woke up in the morning? So you get very practiced at pulling that information out of people and interviewing separately as well, because you always have a more dominant character in a relationship than the other one, who talks more than the other one. So by doing this, we're not getting just one viewpoint, we're actually getting their individual thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, I love that. I really do love that. So when we are talking about these love stories, the people who would be best to present this to a couple, because I'm thinking of it, it's not something that would automatically, it's not one of the standard wedding things that you've got to book. It's not a florist, it's not the photographer, things like that. So really, with your product, it needs to be brought to the couple's attention.
Yeah.
So for me, from my point of view, I see this as something that photographers, wedding planners and celebrants would be really good. And maybe you can mention anybody else that you feel would be. But for me, this could be a great add-on product for a photographer, because obviously they're taking the photos, so on the day, the professional ones, so they would be able to liaise with you guys to give you the images that you need from that perspective and create this sort of add-on product for photographers, which I think would be amazing. I used to have an add-on product that was a cartoon image, so not like a caricature, but a cartoon version of one. I used to give the guy a couple of different photos from the day, and he would create a brand new image from those photos in the bride and groom's likeness. It was lovely, and that was my add-on product. So I think add-on products can work very well for photographers, and this would fit really, really nicely with that. Wedding planners, obviously you're seeing the couple from the beginning of their journey, planning their wedding to the end, and this would be a great product for you to sort of to let them know exists and give them that opportunity of having this kind of fantastic memory. And then as we were talking before we started recording, I was talking about how celebrants are so good at creating a story for the ceremony, but being able to include part of that into their book would be amazing. And so for celebrants too, this would be a good thing for them to mention when they're talking to couples, to sort of say, hey, have you heard about? So I think those are really three great connections that would work really well for you in getting this product out to as many people, because I think it is just so valuable. I think we should definitely look at writing our stories down more. Is there anybody else that you would say that you look to talk to and connect with?
I think you've covered them, and I think you're right. And I'm happy to. We have collaborative partnerships with all those three areas. You know, celebrants, photographers, wedding planners, and happy to discuss any partnership with them from a referral basis and working alongside them. We do that already. Fabulous. And you're right, and including the order of service, for example, or the poem that they chose, the couple of poems that they chose, is a lovely, to put that in there, and a copy of their wedding invite. We always want to put that. The book itself is styled on their theme, so their colors, their theme, whatever that is, it's really important that it takes on their style. So by working with any of those three, and actually the photographer as well, connected, and has already got this amazing rapport as well. I think a photographer has a great rapport with the couple, and the celebrant and the wedding planner as well. So yeah, absolutely. And we often, as you rightly said, it's not something you would typically buy yourself either as a couple. We've tended to find it's bought as a gift. As well, so directly from we're finding as well, this was through no planning, just by kind of luck and what's happened. Often the bride or groom's or groom's parents has been an actual gift. They don't know quite what to buy them other than what's on their John Lewis waiting list, some Egyptian cotton sheets or something. So they're all towels. So they tend to, gift them.
Such a better gift than that. I mean, we've moved away now from where couples are having their weddings paid for by their parents. We're all paying for our own weddings these days. And often the bride's family might buy her dress. I've heard that a lot, that the bride's family bought the dress, and then it leaves one side of the family with well, what can we contribute? Or again, it's just so much better than a present that's going to be used on the day, consumed and gone.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Or a dress that's going to be put away, or or just adding money to it. Having it, it's just a lovely touch that the grandparents are buying a present for the parents that will be passed on to the children and the grandchildren and the great grandchildren. I
think my dad bought his wine. I think he paid for the wine because that was his contribution. He wanted to contribute something. So absolutely something like this, pretending to find the couple's parents or grandparents or the loved ones are clubbing together to going, right, we're going to buy this for you because we want to contribute in some way. So this is one way of doing it. So we're tending to find that as well.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that. So what is the future of storytellers? Because we spoke beforehand and I mentioned another company that had come up in a YouTube video from America that do something similar, and you said that you've got some interesting things in the pipeline coming towards the end of the year for storytellers. So tell us a little bit about that.
So what we are building is a self-service kind of storybook. So the idea behind this is you would gift it to someone and they can go in and build their own storybook. So rather than being interviewed by one of our storytellers, one of our interviewees, they'll actually go in and there's each chapter could be edited. You put in your question, your story, but there'll be a series of questions to help nudge you and guide you along your way. So whether you're doing your whole life story, or whether you want to do your own wedding book online, you can still obviously come to us and we can facilitate it, or you can do it as a self-service one. Upload your photos and preview it, tweak it, and then it gets printed and posted out, couriered out to you. So this is at the end of the year we'll be launching this. Couple of reasons. One of the main reasons, it's a more affordable storybook for a lot of people, and we're all about people capturing the stories, and we don't want price to be a barrier. And some people find they want to capture it, but they're like, oh, okay, not sure about the price. Less so for weddings, but particularly for other storybooks. So this allows us to reach a greater audience, to capture any of those types of stories, whether it's turning 18th and you want to give that to your 18th, your son, or your 21st, or anniversary, or commemorate your pet, whatever that might look like. It's the ability to do that, and it means we can turn more storybooks around as well, so we can actually produce more because we're not limited necessarily on time.
And that is the big factor, and that is what, as wedding vendors, we know how valuable our time is, and we have a finite amount of it. So when you're sort of getting to your limit on time, you tend to push the price up a bit so that you get less bookings, so you can still live a life. We completely understand that, and being able to do it yourself is a handy option to if price is a barrier. But I also think being able to keep what you're doing now as a core feature of storytellers is so great, because I know for me, if I ever get the ring on my finger, I would definitely it's already listed as I'm sort of building the society and talking to people. I'm like, right, want that for my wedding, want that. I don't know how I'm going to afford it all. Seriously. I would definitely want this, but my other half is quiet. He's not great with his words. He'd be the first to say it. He sometimes, when he's trying to put something together, he literally will stop, and I will go, are you okay? He goes, I'm just thinking. And he really has to take time. So I know that if I wanted something like this, the only way I could make it work would be to pay for your regular
Yeah, I can get that.
Because he would need it pulled out of him.
It needs pulled out of it, and we can record. We've done things like get them to draw something. So some people like to draw, or I get them to take a notepad and pen with them. So when a thought comes, then write it down, or record it on your phone, because we've always got our phones with us. Whether it's a voice note or make a little note of that memory or that story, record it, send it to me on Messenger or WhatsApp or whatever is easy. And we can record it as and when it comes to you, rather than feeling as though you've been put on the spot and it's like an interview and like, now I'm under pressure and I can't think of the answer. So there's ways around it, and we can work with people who find it a little bit more challenging to tap into those emotions and those stories.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love it. Thank you so much for your time today, Sas. I have really enjoyed talking about stories. A lot has come out today that I wasn't expecting. So, it's always interesting to see how these interviews go. It's been great. So if people want to get in touch to talk about partnerships, collabs that they can do with you, where is best for them to find you?
That's a great question. So you can check out our website, give you a little bit more information, which is thestorytellers.biz, or feel free to email me, which is sas@thestorytellers.biz. You can find us on Facebook, The Storytellers International, or can connect with me on LinkedIn. There's only one Sas Huntwood on LinkedIn, so find me on there.
Brilliant. So I will put all of those links in the show notes, guys, so you will be able to just click through and get easy access to Sas and the Storytellers. And that is it for this week. Thank you so much for coming on, Sas. Really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I will speak to you guys next week. Bye for now.
Don't forget to hit those stars and leave a review of the podcast where you listen if you found value in what you heard today. It's a free way you can help the podcast reach more people just like you.